Part 2 of my top 10 films of the 1960s. Now the sixth film I'm going to talk about, well, the sixth film overall and the first film in this part, is The Haunting. It was released in 1963 and was directed by Robert Wise, who actually went on to direct West Side Story and The Sound of Music. It was a bit of a turnaround there. The film is basically about a haunted house, really. And in a really creepy prologue, we are introduced into how ugly the house really is. And then we are driven into the present, where we meet Dr. Markway, who invites 3 young people to come to the house to help out in his psychological experiment to prove the existence of ghosts. And throughout the course of the film, things start to go bump in the night, and eventually one character, Eleanor, who is the main character played by Julie Harris, starts to notice that her relationship with the house is slightly stronger than she first imagined. Now I think it's very important in films, in particular horror films actually, to have different caricatures of different characters. For example, in The Haunting you've got the sceptical and humorous one, Luke. You've got the mysterious and brazen one, Theodora. And you've got the intelligent one, that's Dr. Markway, and you've got the shy and insecure one, that's Eleanor. So this film is a bona fide example of it's what you don't see that's the scariest. For example, and in particular, my personal scariest bit of the film, the scene where Eleanor and Theodora are in the bedroom and things start to go bump in the night, and Eleanor reaches out to grab Theodora's hand for protection, and she says, "Oh, don't let go," and she tells her how scared she is, and eventually the lights come on and it's revealed that Theodora is actually right on the other side of the room and her hand is like that, holding nothing. Now I don't know if any of you have seen the embarrassing remake of this, but one thing that really annoyed me about the remake is its overuse of special effects in the film, and it actually got to a point where it was completely overused and it just looked fake and corny. You know, I just don't think you need to rely on special effects to make a film good. I mean, I know nowadays computers have become so advanced that you won't come across many recent films that won't have at least some special effects in it. But I don't think you need to rely just on special effects to make a film good. I mean, for example, if you look at Avatar, it is a beautiful film, but at the end of the day, if you take away all the fancy effects and animation, it's just the Smurfs reenacting Pocahontas. So yeah, so to be honest, I think to make a good film you need a good story, good acting, and good filming, which this film offers all. And it's bloody scary too, so it's well ahead of its time. Yeah, watch it. Might need the lights on, but watch it. Film number 7 is another Hitchcock, The Birds, released in 1963. Now I guess Hitchcock wanted to make this film because he wanted to show terror in the most unlikely source. For example, birds, we come across these creatures every single day, and you know, we don't expect them to turn nasty. In fact, one of the teaser trailers for The Birds, Hitchcock was standing in the room and he would talk about the positive relationship between man and birds. And he mentions about you know, the fact that we eat them, and you know, we probably do mistreat them in some way. He asks the audience, will these birds ever retaliate? And he has a little bird in the cage and he puts his finger in and a bird nips his finger and he goes, "Oh, now why would he do that?" The plot is fairly simple. Basically a young wealthy woman, Melanie, played by Tippi Hedren from who lives in San Francisco, follows a man to California, and on this little island, birds start to behave nasty. Now, to keep up with the realism, as I've explained before in Psycho, Hitchcock actually did some research into bird behaviour, and just to see whether birds could attack if they were provoked. And another realism aspect, or problem rather, was that Hitchcock wanted the bird attacks to look as realistic as possible. And films in those days, and still do to an extent, rely on blue screen, or green screen it's called nowadays. But at this time, sort of around the late 50s, early 60s, blue screening effects didn't look that realistic. There was a lot of unusual fringing. So Hitchcock actually looked into the sodium processing in film that actually Walt Disney used in some of his films. And what this basically did is have the background filtered with a yellow light, and the subject would be filtered with a white light. And these lighting was sort of mixed together and would just sort of keep the background in the back and keep the subject in the front. For example, if you look at old 40s and 50s films that used the blue screen technique, you could tell it was blue screen. But what this, because it sort of looked, the background sort of looked like it was mixed in with the subject. Having this sodium processing sort of, it kept the background, made the background look like it was in the background, and the subject would be brought forward. Now, sodium processing isn't used nowadays, just because it was very technical and quite expensive, and we've just got computers nowadays, so it's a lot easier. And Hitchcock also wanted to keep the terror of the film alive even after the film had finished. In cinema showings of it, he actually installed speakers on the exit of cinemas which would play bird squawks as the audience walked out. Now, there was no CGI in those days. Well, certainly not to the extent of what we have nowadays. So basically what you see on screen in the birds is basically what you see. Of course, there were some safety measures. For example, there were some fake birds used. The birds were trained and their beaks were clamped shut to stop any biting. But you know, what you actually saw on screen actually happened. For example, the famous playground screen where the birds come in and attack the children. Hitchcock actually had them tied onto their collars, so the birds would be going at them. Now, the thing I love about the birds is how closely fitting it is to real life. You know, I mean, do vampires exist? Maybe. Do zombies exist? Maybe. Do ghosts exist? Maybe. Do birds exist? Yeah, they exist. In fact, I can see one out my window. So that's why I like the birds, and it's just a really good creepy film, and yes, that's the birds. Film number 8 is Persona. Now, I bloody love this film, but to be honest, out of the 10 I've been reviewing, I found this the most difficult to review. Basically, if best way to describe it is, if someone asks you to describe the colour blue, you know what blue is, but you wouldn't be able to describe it. It's a bit like this with this film. Basically, it's a Swedish film, and was directed by Ingmar Bergman, who was a very prolific Swedish director, and was actually a favourite director of Woody Allen. Now, this film probably has the most disturbing and surreal openings ever in film, and it's so. To be honest, I could talk about the opening for hours, but I'll just keep it brief. It's basically a dense montage of clips and images, heavily associated with Christianity. For example, the rather disturbing images and clips of a lamb being slaughtered and someone getting crucified. It also delves into the idea of the construction of film. For example, you can see the actual film roll and film reels in the opening, and also the possibly the aspect of motherhood. We have the young boy in a cold room, and he's reaching out for presumably his mother. And eventually throughout the film we learn that motherhood is actually a really key theme to the film. The film follows the story of Alma, who is a nurse played by Belly Anderson, who is assigned to care for a actress, Elizabeth, played by Liv Ullmann, who one day is just struck down with this illness where she just loses the ability to speak. But it seems that this speech impediment, or speech problem, is the only symptom of this illness, as she seems completely sound in mind and seems perfectly healthy. The only problem is that she either can't speak or won't speak. It's probably that she won't speak. It does seem to be some sort of psychosomatic illness. Because Elizabeth doesn't speak in this film is almost purely carried by the dialogue of Alma. And she realises that she has to do the talking for both of the characters, and eventually at the end of the day, she talks too much and ends up confessing too much and confessing her demons, and eventually it's apparent that the two personalities of the two women seem to meld together, and so eventually the film's quite disturbing climax, we learn that Alma has almost completely lost her identity. Now this film probably has one of the most risque scenes in film, well, probably out of all the non-pornographic films out there, and ironically it doesn't include any nudity at all. It just purely relies on the power of dialogue, and it's the scene in the film where Alma tells Elizabeth about a orgy she had when she was younger, which inevitably got her pregnant with her baby. And she goes and describes it in quite finite detail. And in fact, from what I've read, apparently the original dialogue, so in the Swedish, they felt it was slightly too risque for English audiences. So what you see in the subtitles and the English subtitles is actually toned down to what she's actually really saying. So yeah, I've even thought the English subtitles were quite risque. So I don't know what the Swedish was in the film, but I'd probably take it was quite risque. Now, in contrast to Hitchcock, for example, with Psycho and the Birds I explained before, Bergman actually went against the concept of realism in his films, and he actually kept reminding the audiences that they were actually watching a film. I mean, even from the beginning, we can see the film reel, and at the very end of just after the climatic scene, we see the camera pan away, and it moves on to the film crew, and the film ends as it flickers like an old film, and then goes and then disappears. Now, Persona it's just basically a beautiful visual poem, and it just delves into our subconscious fears of woman and motherhood, and our sense of identity and reality, like what is reality and who really are we? And this film really makes you think about these questions right until the film literally runs out and the screen goes black. So, Persona,